So in this lecture, we're starting chapter 5, and we're going to start to talk about community structure. So an ecological community is all of the populations of species that inhabit a given area. So just a quick review, you have individuals, right? That's like you and I. If you take a whole bunch of individuals like us, you put them together in a particular area, that becomes a population. So you could say, for instance, that like MJC is a population of human individuals. When you get to the community level, it's the populations of all species that inhabit a given area. So if we were to consider MJC to be our community, there would be a lot of really interesting trees there that would be part of the community. All of the students there would be part of the community. The sheep that live out by that pond are part of our community. The horses and cows would be part of that community. So it's all of the species that inhabit a particular area. Um, a lot of communities are dominated by only a few species in high numbers, and those are called ecological dominants. So again, the species that are abundant in a given area are called ecological dominants. So at MJC, it would probably be grasses would be an ecological dominant, and people would be an ecological dominant. So a Kansas prairie field dominated by tall grass. So in this case, the grass is clearly the ecological dominant. It's really the only thing out here. Maybe there's like a tree over here. And then here you have an aspen grove in Colorado, and clearly that's the ecological dominant in this particular community. Interestingly, these aspen trees form a grove, and many of these are probably all the same one individual organism, but that's neither here nor there. Keystone species, these used to be thought of as usually being only apex predators, but we've later figured out that it is any species that if you remove from a community brings about a significant change. So if you remove a keystone species, many things start to happen within a particular community, usually not positive things. So an example here would be the starfish. These were removed from a particular area, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but the book cites that when these keystone species were in that area, there were like 15 species or something like that. And then as soon as you remove them, the numbers drop down to like 8, because these things were eating. I think they were eating barnacles. No, what it was is they were eating a mussel, and that mussel ate barnacles. And as soon as the mussel stopped being preyed upon by these apex starfish, by these keystone species, the barnacles were the mussels were able to take over, and they actually began crowding out a whole bunch of the other species in the region. Clearly, without these starfish in that particular community, the community suffered because it lost biodiversity. Biodiversity is defined as a variety among living things, and it takes 3 primary forms because you can't just, it used to be kind of thought of just in terms of species diversity, but there's lots more to it than that. So there is diversity of species, there's distribution of species, and there's genetic diversity within species populations. And I'll show you a picture so we can kind of talk about those things. So here is high species diversity. You see there's all these examples of these different creatures, these different species living together. This is low biodiversity. There are a few species here, just like ferns and these bugs. And then you have geographic biodiversity. You can see these things are kind of spread out all over the picture. They're broadly distributed, whereas low biodiversity, they're all kind of squished down and only living within one area. And so both of these things are important, right? You have to have a lot of species, but they have to kind of be spread out. And then if you look at the individual species within a community, it's better for them to have high genetic diversity within that particular population. Okay, so these are the 3 factors that we sort of think about when we're thinking about diversity. Species diversity, how many different species they are. Geographic diversity, how broadly distributed those species are within a community. Are they everywhere? Or are they sort of all squished down like this over into the corner? And then you have genetic diversity, where you have greens and blues and yellows, as opposed to here you just kind of have these yellow ones. And so these 3 ideas, or these are the 3 ways that we kind of categorize diversity within a community. So Um, Species diversity enhances a community's productivity and stability. The more diversity that you have in a particular region, the more robust it's going to be to um, changes in that environment. So if you only have one kind of thing in a particular area and you wind up with a disease that kills that one kind of thing, for instance, the monocultures that are growing all over California's fields in the Central Valley, um, is going to be really bad. All of those things are going to die and go away immediately. Whereas if you have lots of variation, you're going to have some plants that are able to actually survive it. You're going to have some individuals. This doesn't just apply to plants, this applies to all species. You're going to have some species within the community that are able to survive. So next we're going to talk about interactions among community members.